What if everything you've been told about death is wrong? Not just slightly off, but completely upside down. Imagine discovering that what happens when we die isn't chaos, silence, or darkness, but a deeply structured, intelligent journey, already mapped out in one mysterious book written over 1,000 years ago. A book so powerful, it claims to guide your soul through realms beyond time, shape your next life, or even free you from the cycle entirely. This isn't fantasy. This is the Tibetan Book of the Dead. In this video, you'll learn exactly what happens when we die, without sugarcoating or vague spiritual fluff. We'll walk through what ancient sages described as the three bardos, mystical states that every soul travels through. But here's the twist. These bardos aren't distant or symbolic. They reflect your inner world, your fears, your desires, your karma, your clarity. And they don't just show up after death. They're already shaping your life right now. If you've ever felt the pull of something greater, if you've ever sensed that this life isn't all there is, or that death might actually hold a deeper purpose, this video will speak directly to your soul, because once you understand this map, you'll never see life or death the same way again. Imagine your final breath not as an ending, but as a doorway. According to the mysterious book known as the Tibetan Book of the Dead, death doesn't annihilate consciousness, it shifts it. Like a river leaving one valley to flow into another, awareness continues its journey through realms that most people can't even fathom. These states, called bardos, are not some fantasy. They are deeply embedded in spiritual traditions that have guided dying people for centuries. Instead of fearing death, the book reveals it as a sacred transition. And what happens in those mysterious spaces between worlds could change how we live right now. The first bardo begins the moment you die. In that instant, your consciousness is said to encounter the clear light of awareness, a radiant, all-encompassing clarity. But here's the catch: most people don't recognize it. Their attachment to form, ego, or fear pulls them away from the light. Like waking up in a dream and forgetting you're dreaming. They miss the opportunity to become liberated. It's as if eternity knocks, but the door remains unopened. The mysterious book reveals that recognizing this light is the key to escaping the cycles of suffering we carry life after life. For those who fail to merge with the clear light, consciousness moves into other bardos, vast, surreal landscapes shaped by memory, belief, and desire. You might say it's like entering your own mind, projected into cosmic scale. Everything you've loved, feared, or suppressed comes to greet you. There are no lies here. These realms act like mirrors, reflecting back what your soul has absorbed throughout your lifetime. And yet, the mysterious book teaches that even here, you can awaken, if only you recognize the illusion. This continuation of consciousness isn't just mystical poetry. Many near-death experiences describe floating above their bodies, entering tunnels of light, encountering beings of wisdom. Their stories echo the exact stages described in this ancient book, written over 200 years ago. Could these be glimpses of the same bardos? If so, science and spirituality might be touching hands in the dark. What happens when we die might not be a mystery at all, but a map hidden in plain sight. Think about this. What if your true self has already died 1,000 deaths, and each lifetime is just a chapter in a book you forgot you were writing? The Tibetan sages believed that knowing this changes everything. It makes you less afraid. It makes you more intentional, because when consciousness continues, every choice echoes beyond this life. The way you think, feel, and love now shapes the terrain you'll walk through when the body dissolves. This isn't some abstract philosophy for monks on mountaintops. It's deeply personal. If your awareness doesn't end, then how you relate to fear, regret, and attachment becomes spiritual preparation. This book doesn't just explain what happens after death. It teaches how to live with death in mind, which paradoxically makes life more vibrant, like walking a tightrope with your heart open to the sky. Death becomes not the destroyer but the revealer. And here's the deeper mystery. What if you've already glimpsed these bardos in dreams, meditations, or déjà vu moments where reality feels strangely translucent? The mysterious book whispers that these are reminders of who you truly are beyond flesh. Consciousness doesn't fear death, only the ego does. And once you learn to separate the two, the next stages begin to unfold. The mysterious book reveals that what happens when we die unfolds in three distinct stages, three bardos, that guide the soul through its cosmic transition. First comes the bardo of the moment of death. In this state, the veil between body and spirit is lifted. Everything slows, time dissolves. The soul witnesses its own unraveling, and in this stillness, the clear light appears. It's not a light you see with your eyes, it's a pure awareness, like staring into the infinite and seeing yourself reflected back as pure being. But most people don't recognize it. They cling to fear, memory, or identity, and the opportunity passes. If the clear light is missed, the soul enters the second bardo, the bardo of visions. Here, reality becomes a projection of your deepest mind. Peaceful deities, wrathful deities, luminous landscapes, terrifying storms. It's all there, but none of it is external. This realm is like a mirror maze of consciousness. Imagine standing in front of every thought and emotion you've ever had, now wearing the faces of gods and monsters. If you panic, you run deeper into illusion, but if you remain centered, you realize nothing can harm you here. It's all you. This second bardo can be liberating or overwhelming. It depends entirely on your mental clarity. If you've trained your mind in life to remain calm and aware, then these visions become symbolic doorways. They're not threats, they're teachings. But if you've lived in fear, greed, or confusion, then the very fabric of your own mind becomes a trap. This is why Tibetan masters say, your mind is the creator of heaven and hell. The bardo isn't a judgment, it's a mirror, amplified. Eventually, the soul enters the third bardo, the bardo of rebirth. Here, the weight of karma becomes gravity. You're pulled, magnetized toward a new womb, a new life, a new karmic environment. You might see your future parents, your next environment, even your coming struggles. But you don't choose with logic. You choose with energy. Wherever your emotional and mental frequency resonates, that's where you're drawn, and so the wheel turns again. This third stage is subtle but powerful. It's not random. It's precision, guided by your own vibration. Have you lived with compassion or anger, presence or distraction? These patterns don't vanish. They imprint themselves into the trajectory of your next incarnation. The mysterious book says, we fall into rebirth the way a dreamer falls into sleep, unaware that another story is beginning. But if you're conscious, even here, you can choose freedom instead. These three bardos form a sacred cycle: death, reflection, rebirth. They're not punishments or rewards, but natural continuations of consciousness. Imagine them like waves. You don't stop the tide, but you can learn to surf it. The entire purpose of the Tibetan teachings is to prepare the soul to ride these waves with awareness, and maybe, just maybe, to wake up midstream and realize you're not the wave. You're the ocean. And now the question emerges: if what we face after death are projections of our inner world, how do we prepare the mind to face itself? That leads us to the next mystery, one that's not just metaphysical, but profoundly personal. What if everything you experience after death is nothing more and nothing less than your own mind staring back at you? The mysterious book reveals that the gods and demons we meet in the bardos are not actual beings, but symbolic reflections of our consciousness. The peaceful deities, your love, your clarity, your wisdom. The wrathful ones, your anger, your guilt, your unhealed wounds. This isn't metaphor, it's spiritual architecture. You're not judged by an outside force, you're met by yourself. And that's where the real journey begins. This is where many souls falter. We're conditioned to look outward, blame, escape, distract, but in the bardo, there's nowhere to run. Your mind is the stage, the script, and the audience. If you see a terrifying face, it's a projection of your fear. If you're chased, you're being chased by an emotion you never made peace with. The wise know the way to transcend is not to flee, but to recognize, to say, "This is me." That simple realization has the power to dissolve lifetimes of illusion. That's why spiritual practice isn't about rituals, it's about awareness. The more you face your emotions in life, the less power they hold in death. Think of it like cleaning a mirror. Every honest act of introspection polishes the surface. So when the bardos come, you see clearly instead of being blinded by distortion. The mysterious book insists on this. Know your mind, and the bardos become your liberation, not your prison. Fail to know your mind, and you're reborn again, lost in dreams. Real-world example, think of an intense breakup. The feelings, the thoughts, the inner chaos, it's overwhelming. That's a mini bardo. You're not dying physically, but something inside is collapsing. If you react blindly, that energy becomes a karmic imprint. If you meet it with presence, you transform. This is why Tibetan masters teach people to meditate on death while still alive, so you don't get shocked by your own psyche later. Every inner wound healed now is a gate opened in the next world. Meditation, journaling, shadow work, these aren't trendy tools. They're training for the real test, because when your mind becomes the world you walk through, you'll wish you had faced your shadows sooner. The deities aren't here to punish, they're teachers. Each terrifying form is a masked lesson waiting to be acknowledged, and when you bow to it, not in fear, but in recognition, it dissolves, revealing light behind the mask. In that sense, the bardos aren't something that happens only when we die. They're happening right now, inside. Every fear avoided, every truth denied, builds a landscape in your unconscious. The mysterious book doesn't threaten you with damnation. It invites you to clarity. It shows you that the ultimate spiritual act is to know yourself fully, without flinching. That's the doorway to liberation. And if the mind truly creates our post-death experience, then what fuels that creation? What invisible thread pulls one soul into peace and another into chaos? That's where the law of karma reveals itself, not as punishment, but as design. Imagine your soul as a compass, constantly magnetized by your own energy. According to the mysterious book, karma isn't about reward or punishment, it's about alignment. Every thought, emotion, and intention leaves a subtle imprint in your field of consciousness. These imprints don't disappear when the body dies. Instead, they become the blueprint for where your consciousness flows in the bardo. Karma, then, is the architecture of your rebirth. You don't go where you deserve, you go where you resonate. This changes the whole story of what happens when we die. You're not thrown into a random afterlife. You're drawn like iron to a magnet toward a life that matches the emotional frequency you cultivated. If you lived with bitterness, you attract confusion. If you cultivated compassion, you're pulled toward clarity. Karma becomes the spiritual gravity of the soul. Not a judge, not a jury, just a mirror that reflects your inner truth. And the reflection is so precise that you can't cheat it. Even your intentions matter. A kind act done with pride doesn't echo the same way as one done in humility. The bardo doesn't listen to what you said, it listens to what you meant. This is why the mysterious book emphasizes purification of motive as much as action. In the silence between lives, all masks are removed. What you truly are is what you bring with you. Karma isn't just stored in the mind, it's stored in the soul's vibration. That's what shapes your next incarnation. To understand this, think of a song. Each note is a choice, a feeling, a thought. By the end of life, your soul is playing a unique melody. When death comes, the bardos hear that melody and respond accordingly. If it's discordant, you enter chaos. If it's harmonious, you enter peace. That's why spiritual practices focus on tuning the heart, not to be good in a moral sense, but to resonate with truth, compassion, and presence, because those notes endure. Even science hints at this. Studies in epigenetics and energy fields suggest that emotions alter physical and energetic environments. Your thoughts literally shape your aura. Now imagine that aura guiding your soul through death. The mysterious book sees karma as light and shadow, interacting, dancing, balancing, and it shows us, to change your next life, you must change how you live this one. It's not about fear, it's about responsibility. You are your own sculptor. That's why Tibetan teachers often say, every moment is karma, not in a heavy or punishing way, but as an invitation to live awake. The bardo of rebirth doesn't surprise you. It completes you. It's like turning a page in a book you've been writing every day without realizing it. And the pen is in your hand right now. The beauty of karma is that it's not fixed, it's evolving. Every act of awareness rewrites the script. But here's the deeper truth. You don't have to wait until death to influence karma. Every heartbreak, illness, or crisis you face now can become a spiritual rehearsal for transition. These life bardos hold the same lessons and the same chances for awakening as death itself. And that's what we'll explore next. If death is a mirror of consciousness, then life is the training ground. The mysterious book teaches that preparing for death begins long before the final breath. It begins in how we wake up, how we breathe, how we treat others, and how we hold our own emotions. Tibetan wisdom sees every moment as preparation, not for escape, but for recognition. Because when death arrives, it doesn't give you time to learn. It only reveals what you've already cultivated. One of the core practices is recognizing the clear light. This isn't something you just hope for, it's something you train to notice. Meditation becomes the rehearsal. In stillness, you begin to touch that vast, luminous awareness that exists beneath the surface of thought. The more familiar you are with this presence in life, the more likely you are to recognize it in the bardo of death. Think of it like learning the scent of a flower. You won't mistake it when it blooms again in another realm. Another essential practice is Tonglen, the meditation of giving and receiving. You breathe in the suffering of others and breathe out healing. This might sound poetic, but it's profoundly practical. It trains the heart to stay open in the presence of pain. It builds compassion, not as a concept, but as a lived force. And in the bardos, where fear and confusion arise, compassion becomes your anchor. You don't panic, you serve. Even in transition, your heart remembers its purpose. Mantra, recitation, is also vital. In Tibetan tradition, sacred syllables aren't just sounds, they're vibrations that stabilize consciousness. Reciting mantras creates energetic patterns that echo into the afterlife. It's like weaving a thread of intention that continues when thought ceases. Many dying practitioners are read mantras or have recordings played as they pass, helping the soul align with higher frequencies. It's not superstition, it's tuning the soul's instrument for the next movement. Living with death in mind doesn't make life morbid, it makes it radiant. You stop wasting time on trivial fears. You stop chasing what doesn't nourish the spirit. You begin to love more freely, speak more honestly, and walk with a quiet reverence. Death stops being a threat and becomes a teacher. It humbles you, it sharpens your clarity, and strangely, it makes joy more accessible, because you're no longer trying to avoid the inevitable. This is why ancient masters were obsessed with dying well. Not because they feared death, but because they knew it was the most sacred moment of clarity a soul can experience. They wanted to be ready, to die consciously, to meet death not with resistance, but with recognition, as if greeting an old friend who came to lead them home. That kind of death only comes from a life lived with awareness. And this leads to a hidden truth. Death isn't the only rehearsal. Life constantly offers small deaths, transitions, losses, endings. These are bardos too, and the way we move through them reveals exactly how we'll meet the final crossing. So what if we started treating every change as a sacred preparation? That question leads us directly into the next mystery. Before we continue, I want to ask you something important. What do you believe happens when we die? Do you think consciousness continues or fades away? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Whether your view is scientific, spiritual, or somewhere in between, your voice matters. Let's turn this space into a real conversation about life, death, and the mysteries in between. I'll be reading and responding. Now let's return to the journey. You don't have to wait for death to enter the bardos. You're living them every day. The mysterious book reveals that transitions in life mirror the transitions after death. A breakup, the loss of a job, an illness, even a sudden emotional shift. All of these are bardos in miniature. They rupture the known and push you into the unknown. And just like in the bardos of death, your response determines whether you spiral into confusion or awaken into clarity. Think about the last time something ended abruptly. A relationship, a role, a dream. In that moment, your old identity died. The space afterward, the not knowing, the grief, the fear is a bardo. And what arises there is a direct reflection of your mind. If you cling, you suffer. If you soften and observe, the door opens. These moments are sacred rehearsals. The mysterious book doesn't separate death from life. It teaches that every moment of letting go prepares you for the ultimate surrender. In this way, spiritual growth isn't confined to the cushion or the temple. It happens when your heart breaks and you choose presence over bitterness, when your plans collapse and you breathe instead of react. These are bardos, and how you meet them creates momentum for your soul. You begin to notice a pattern. Every emotional storm is a reflection of an inner energy that wants to be seen. Every loss is a mirror. Every fear is a lesson wrapped in disguise. That's why awareness is everything. When you treat life as a spiritual mirror, nothing is wasted. Even suffering becomes alchemy. Imagine entering each challenge as if it were a sacred passage, a portal into deeper understanding. That's not delusion, that's mastery. The Tibetan tradition teaches that by navigating these daily bardos with presence, you literally train your soul for death. You learn to let go gracefully. You learn to stay awake in the unknown. Even the body teaches this. Sleep is a mini-death. Every night you dissolve into unconsciousness, and yet you wake. What if death is just a deeper sleep from which you can awaken if you've practiced awareness? This is why so many spiritual traditions emphasize lucid dreaming, not for entertainment, but for training. If you can awaken in a dream, you can awaken in the bardo. And if you can awaken there, you can be free. So what's the takeaway? Every transition, no matter how small, is sacred. The end of a conversation, the moment before you speak, the silence after a breath, all bardos. The space between heartbeats is a doorway. You just have to be still enough to feel it. The mysterious book whispers this truth over and over. You're always dying and always being reborn. The question is, are you conscious of it? And when death does come, how much easier will it be if you've practiced 1,000 times already? This brings us to a powerful Tibetan tradition, one where death isn't met alone, but guided by a voice from this world to the next. Imagine taking your last breath, and instead of falling into fear or confusion, you hear a calm, loving voice guiding you through the realms beyond. That's the purpose of the Bardo Thodol, or what many call the mysterious book that reveals what happens when we die. In Tibetan tradition, a spiritual guide, often a lama or trained practitioner, reads this text aloud to the dying or recently deceased. It's not a ritual for comfort. It's a precise map, a lifeline through the bardos, spoken into the ears of the soul as it journeys between worlds. This reading serves as a mirror, reminding the soul of what it is seeing and feeling and what it truly means. What you see now is not real, the guide may say. It is your own mind appearing in symbolic form. These reminders can be the difference between fear and liberation. When the wrathful deities appear, the soul may be tempted to run, but with the Lama's voice cutting through the illusion, the soul may remember, this is my fear-made form. I don't need to fight. I need to recognize. The timing of this guidance is crucial. Traditionally, it begins as soon as death is confirmed and continues for up to 49 days, covering the believed duration of the bardo states. Each day, specific verses are read that correspond to the possible experiences the soul may be encountering. It's like calling out to a traveler lost in a dream, hoping they'll awaken. This is why Tibetan culture honors death not with silence, but with sacred sound. The soul needs reminders. It needs direction. This guidance isn't just for monks or mystics. Even lay practitioners receive this care. Families will sometimes play recorded readings of the Bardo Thodol near the body. Some whisper mantras into the ear of the dying, knowing that hearing is the last sense to fade. It's all done with the same aim, to awaken the soul during its most vulnerable and most open state, because what happens in that openness can change the entire trajectory of one's rebirth, or transcend it altogether. This practice teaches us something profound, that death is not a moment, but a passage, and no one should walk it alone. Imagine if our modern cultures treated dying not as a medical emergency, but as a sacred crossing. Imagine if hospitals included guides trained in spiritual care, not just to comfort the grieving, but to help the departing navigate the bardos with clarity. The Tibetan tradition doesn't just offer compassion, it offers spiritual precision. The idea of guided dying might sound foreign, even strange, but at its heart is something deeply human. The need to be seen and supported during transformation. We do this during birth. Why not at death? The mysterious book reveals that the soul listens, and that a single word, spoken with awareness, can help pierce the veil. That's why Tibetan lamas spend their lives studying these texts, to serve others in their final and perhaps most important moment of awakening. And as we start to see these spiritual technologies not just as metaphysical, but as deeply practical, we're drawn into another question. How do these ancient insights connect to modern understanding? Could science and spirituality be closer than we think? It may surprise you, but some of the ideas in the mysterious book that reveals what happens when we die align closely with modern psychology and neuroscience. Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, once described archetypes, universal images and symbols that live in the unconscious mind. Peaceful and wrathful deities in the bardos. Archetypes, the mirror-like nature of the mind. Jung called it the self, the totality of conscious and unconscious energies. Without ever touching the Bardo Thodol, he stumbled into its wisdom through inner exploration. Modern neuroscientists have also found curious parallels. Near-death experiences often involve tunnels of light, life reviews, encounters with otherworldly presences, all experiences described in the Bardo texts centuries earlier. Some researchers now propose that consciousness may be non-local, not produced by the brain, but simply filtered through it. In that case, when the body dies, consciousness doesn't end. It expands. This theory resonates powerfully with the Tibetan view that awareness continues, shaped not by biology, but by energy, karma, and perception. Quantum physics also whispers strange agreements. The observer effect shows that consciousness influences particles. In other words, reality changes depending on who's watching. Tibetan teachings say the same. Your awareness shapes the bardos. There is no fixed world out there. only your mind, projected? Could it be that the bardos aren't fantasy, but quantum states of perception? It's not about proving religion with science, it's about realizing that both are maps, pointing to the same mystery from different angles. Even the practice of visualization, central to Tibetan meditations, is now a tool in modern therapy. Guided imagery has been proven to reduce pain, heal trauma, and alter brain patterns. When the Bardo Thodol speaks of visualizing deities, it's not superstition. It's training the brain to respond to higher symbols, to anchor the mind when the ego collapses. Psychology is only beginning to scratch the surface of what Tibetan sages explored centuries ago. So what does all this mean? It means that we're not as separate from ancient wisdom as we think, that our deepest spiritual truths might not contradict science, they might complete it. And more importantly, it means that we don't have to choose between logic and faith. We can live in the overlap. We can use meditative practice to train the brain. We can use archetypes to understand our shadow. We can die with both insight and intention. Perhaps most beautiful is this: science may one day explain how consciousness continues after death, but only spirituality will show us why. And while researchers run their experiments, the soul still walks the bardos, carrying the weight of its choices. The mysterious book reminds us that knowledge is not enough, we must live it. And that's where we return to the heart of this message, not in theory, but in daily practice. Because ultimately, what we're learning here isn't just about what happens when we die. It's about how we live now, with deeper presence, purpose, and love. And that brings us to the most important teaching of all. So, after all these sacred revelations, what are we meant to do with them? The mysterious book that reveals what happens when we die isn't just an esoteric manual for monks. It's a guide for how to live every single day with intention. The truth is, if the mind creates the bardos, then every choice you make now echoes into the beyond. Each moment becomes sacred. Each breath becomes a preparation. And that changes everything. Start by living with mindfulness, not as a trend, but as a way of remembering, I am here, I am aware, I am not this passing storm. When you walk, walk with presence. When you speak, speak with care. When you suffer, suffer consciously, so the pain becomes a teacher, not a chain. The bardos teach us that no experience is wasted if we meet it with open eyes. Even your anxiety, your anger, your heartbreak, they are not enemies, they're your practice. Practice recognizing your emotions as passing clouds, not your identity. This helps you prepare for the bardos of death, where emotions appear as gods and monsters. See through them now, and you'll see through them later. Integrate techniques like breathwork, loving-kindness meditation, and reflective journaling. These aren't just mental hacks, they're soul disciplines. They stabilize your consciousness, sharpen your awareness, and help you face life and death with open hands. Also, live with compassion, give more than you take. Forgive often, release resentment like it's poison, because it is. The karma you build isn't just for the next life, it shapes this one too. Tibetan wisdom says, the moment of death is like a mirror. Whatever's on your heart, that's what you see. So let your heart be light, let your actions be clean, let your love be real. That's the art of dying well, by living well. You can even create your own rituals. Light a candle and sit in silence for those who've passed. Read sacred texts, not as commandments, but as companions. Ask yourself each morning, if today were my last day, would I meet it with peace? This isn't morbid, it's liberating, because when you stop fearing the end, you start truly living the middle. You become more grateful, more curious, more present. Death stops being a thief and becomes a mirror. In the end, the greatest mystery isn't what happens when we die, it's what we're capable of when we finally live with death in mind. The mysterious book invites you to wake up now, not later, to see that every ending is a doorway and every breath is a gift. You don't need to master every teaching. You just need to begin. Start where you are. That's always been enough. And so we reach the edge of the journey, but not the end, because now comes the most powerful question of all. If you truly believed consciousness continues after death, how would you live differently today? Now that you've seen what the mysterious book reveals about what happens when we die, the real question becomes, what will you do with this wisdom? You don't have to wait for death to enter the bardos. You're already moving through them. Every time life shifts, every time something ends. This knowledge isn't about escaping the world. It's about living more fully in it, with awareness, with compassion, with the understanding that every thought, every word, every action is shaping the energy you'll carry into the next realm. So breathe more deeply, listen more honestly, love with your whole being. Begin small, perhaps with a daily moment of stillness, a mantra, or simply asking, what am I creating with my mind today? Because if the bardos are mirrors, let your reflection be one of peace. Let me ask you something deeply personal. If you knew your consciousness would continue after death, what would you change right now? Take that question with you. Sit with it, live it, and if this video stirred something within you, if it sparked curiosity, clarity, or even just a moment of stillness, consider subscribing and turning on notifications. This channel is here to explore life, death, spirit, and everything in between. Together, your journey matters.